What's up, Packer fans? I'm Nariah Chapek, host of Porn of the Packers podcast, and training camp is 2 days in. The season is upon us, and there's one player apparently that is not practicing. You know who it is. It's Jordan Love. He hasn't got his contract yet. What the hell's going on? We are going to dive into it further in this episode. It is time to pour ourselves another Packers podcast. Well, why don't we just start with some easy stuff? We'll start with some easy conversation. This is gonna be, we're looking 45 minutes to an hour. Christian, welcome back. I updated our Facebook page to add your name and co-host to for
You
another
did?
Packers podcast. Yeah, no, exciting news. I know it's exciting, kind of a big deal. But I do want to ask you, what do you think of the whole podcast last week? What were your thoughts? Felt like it went good. We have a super huge delay, which is we're figuring out. By the way, we're gonna get this all ironed out in the next couple of weeks. But until then, I'm gonna see your lips moving. I'm gonna hear some audio through my ears. What was your takeaway from one recording on the
It
channel?
was a lot of fun. It was talking Packers football. It was fun to see the behind the scenes part of it, how the recording goes. And I know this format's new to you too, so we're learning as we go. I hopefully have some better lighting today. You said it was pretty dark on my screen.
I didn't actually think that the lighting. I didn't think it was all that bad actually. When I got to the post, like actually using the software and recording and whatnot, I actually thought it turned out halfway decent. So I apologize for giving you shit last time.
Well, I mean, I don't mind it being brighter. You can see a little bit more of the background and stuff too. If you could see behind my computer, it's disaster. It's my kids' playroom, so there's toys and crap everywhere. So this
Yeah,
corner looks nice though.
it's a beautiful corner. Do you want to talk about that background of yours? I know we had a little pre-recording, and I have to stop looking down at the computer. I want to look at that camera. You got some things, some items on, some
Yeah,
signatures on those
so
pictures
up
back there.
top, obviously we have my certificate being a owner of the Green Bay Packers. One share, but
Yep.
I'm an owner and I'm proud of it.
Yep. That's all you need.
Um the pictures. So actually it's kind of a unique story. So so the two guys I got up there, I have Jordy Nelson and Nick Collins. Both are signed pictures. So back, yeah,
Never heard of them.
they're not very well known, but it was cool. I actually got to meet them. So when I was in high school,
Mhm.
I I was playing baseball in the spring, so it wasn't even football season, and I was in Hudson, Wisconsin for a baseball game. And I don't know if this is the exact truth or what the exact story was, but apparently Jordy Nelson, Nick Collins, and Brady Papenga were on some sort of signing tour in the area, and they were at like a Hudson
Yep.
mall or something like that. And somehow the Hudson High School athletic director got in touch with them and had them come down to our baseball game. So we were just warming up for our game, and all of a sudden this big huge Packers bus pulls up, and off walks Jordy Nelson, Nick Collins, and Brady Papenga. And this was 2010, spring of 2010. So I mean that was right before.
You're aging yourself.
Yeah, a little bit. But that was before the last Packers Super Bowl. So Jordy Nelson was becoming a big name. Nick Collins had been around for a
Yep.
little while. So they got off the bus, and both Hudson's baseball team and our baseball team just went over to the bus, and we were just bullshitting with them for 15, 20 minutes. They had these stacks of cards that they were signing and handing out, and I remember me and one of my buddies was just standing there chatting with Jordy Nelson, like, just an everyday conversation. So, kind of a cool story with the signatures that I have up there. Definitely don't have as much stuff as you got set up, but I mean, I have a curtain
Flair.
and my pictures.
Yeah. I mean, what else do you need? The moral of that story is Brady Papinga sounds like a real dick because you didn't get his signed picture hanging on your wall, and that's not cool. That's what I
We
took
may
away from
wanna
that
edit this
story.
out, but I do have a card with his signature, but he was kind of a
No.
n not as high profile player for the Packers, so I didn't include him on the wall.
Yeah.
I could add him, but I do have his signature as
Okay.
well.
Yeah. Well, good. He's not as bad of a guy as we once thought. And my flair, I mean, I don't even know where to begin with my flair. It's been they got jerseys, they got magazine covers, football. Probably my favorite item, if my wife ever decides to watch any of these episodes, is this was actually our wedding topper for our cake. So my aunt's a huge Packers fan as well. My whole family is, quite frankly. But yeah, hung on to that all these years. Put a little plant. So yeah, no, it's this is a little new setup. Yeah, I mean it is what it is. This a couple years in the making and a lifetime of cheering on the Packers, I guess, is what it boils down to. But we should probably talk some Packer news. And there's no bigger topic going around right now in Packerland than that of Jordan Love. So it was a surprise to me. I mean, Monday morning, we had our first is kind of the kickoff to training camp. Brian Gutekunst opens up his press conference, and I think it was either the first or second question. Still laying in bed because I don't have to work till later. Drinking my coffee and I'm kind of thinking about taking notes, but I was like, let's just watch it and enjoy it right now. And right off the bat, yeah, Jordan Love's camp. For those of you that have been living under a rock, but Jordan Love camp letting the Green Bay Packers organization know on Saturday night that Jordan would not be practicing until there was a new contract in place. And I immediately jumped out of bed, went and grabbed my iPad. I'm like, oh, I got to get something kind of drawn up and posted on social media because that's a big deal. I mean, we talked last week and every news kind of source that we had and where we get our information, which is where anyone else can get their information probably, or it is, told us that there would be a new contract in place before training camp. We were certain of it. So much so that when we recorded last week, I was in such a hurry to get the video posted that I thought there would be a contract that came out and anything that we said wouldn't matter anymore. And we'd have to re-record or do another video or whatever the case is. But here we are, 2 days into training camp. I'll get into the finer details, but I guess what was your initial reaction to hearing that Jordan Love would not be practicing or be holding out until he got his
Yeah, I
contract?
was definitely surprised to hear that he was holding out, and surprised because I haven't seen Jordan Love as that type of guy, not wanting to cause drama. Just didn't seem like the type of guy that's gonna hold out. But it kinda makes sense. I understand where he's coming from. He wants to get something done. Everything that I've seen, he's very much involved. I just right before we got on here, I saw a tweet. Him and Matt LaFleur were walking onto the practice field on Monday together, smiling, laughing. So I don't think that there's any sort of animosity. I don't think that there's any bad blood in the water about this. I think both sides understand where Jordan Love is coming from, and it's just something that they'll have to get done in the next few days here, hopefully. And from everything I read, he's been very involved in practice. So he was on the field, he was watching drills, he's been in film sessions. It's not like he's MIA and not not wanting to be a part of the team until he gets paid. That doesn't seem to be the case. So I'm not all that worried about it. I They'll get it done and he'll be at practice soon.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's worried about it. Brian Gutekunst made that a point too in his comments after, announcing what he announced was that, both parties essentially want the same thing, which is a promising thing to hear. It was a surprise. I didn't think he would hold out either. And they technically call it a hold in. And to the points that you had brought up there is that, he did show up to training camp. He is an active participant, so he's sitting inside of the film sessions. He's doing workouts. He's actually on the practice field. A little spoiler alert for you, Christian, because you didn't know this yet. But our thumbnail for this YouTube video is going to be him and Matt LaFleur standing there, being on the or at practice. So that everyone's going to be able to get a chance to see that photo if they're watching this video just by looking at the thumbnail. But to that point, the surprising thing is, Love has done I would argue everything right up to this point. You look at his character and the way he's handled himself. He had to deal with, the final years of the Aaron Rodgers saga, which quite frankly were full of drama to the nth degree. We got ourselves a full soap opera in Green Bay with how the last couple of years of Aaron Rodgers went down. And not once did you hear Jordan Love really say anything that he shouldn't have said. And what I mean by that is he played the role, he played the part. He, bought into, I'm here to be a member of this team, and when my time comes, my time comes. But he was never ruffling any feathers, saying he wanted to start. I demand to start, demand a trade. None of that stuff came up. Probably the closest that came up was 2 years ago when Rodgers was kind of heading into, I think it was right after his final season, and Love was like, "You got to make a decision. Either give me that contract extension, which they did heading into last season, or you kind of give me a chance to go out there and test the waters." And clearly, the Packers got rid of Rodgers, moved in with Love, but I digress. What I'm getting at is that his character has been, outstanding this entire time, and it was surprising to see that he wasn't going to practice. But on the flip side, good for him too. I mean, the Packers know what they have in him. He knows what he's capable of. He's done everything right up to this point. He's heard. I mean, the talk started between Love and the front office as early as the scouting combine back in February in Indianapolis. That's when these contract conversations started. He reported to Green Bay last Wednesday ahead of training camp. You probably saw some reports that I did too that, what was it, Sean Clifford showed up to training camp Monday morning at 7:30 and Jordan Love's bags were already there. I mean, he's not like the CeeDee Lambs of the world who just had a report come out today that they're holding out. They're not going to show up at training camp. So he's doing everything right. This deal is going to get done, but there's a lot of intricacies that have to go into this to make both parties happy. Any additional thoughts as I maybe kind of turn this into what we could potentially looking at as far as holdups or what's taking so long on this?
No, I don't think that I have anything else to add. I think we both agree that he's a man of good character. I don't think that this hold in is a sign of drama or anything like that. I'm actually excited to hear kind of your breakdown of what is holding things up because I don't pay super close attention to contracts. I mean, I see the notifications, hey, this guy got paid this many $1 million, but I don't dig into it
And
all that much. So you can probably teach me something about what their options are and what might be the holdup right now.
I'm used to rambling because I'm used to just doing this by myself. So if you ever have a thought, we're gonna have to maybe get a buzzer or something where you're like, "Hey, I got something I need to say," because I could probably keep going and going. But yes, essentially, here's kind of what we're looking at. It it ultimately has to boil down to guaranteed money. When you look at two of the highest paid quarterbacks in the league, as far as Justin Burrow and Trevor Lawrence, Justin Burrow signed a $146.5 million fully guaranteed contract. Trevor Lawrence signed a $142 million fully guaranteed contract. Now, there's a lot of risk with giving a player a fully guaranteed contract. Let's look at maybe a Deshaun Watson of the world, where you've now committed to paying a guy all this money to come play for the Cleveland Browns, and he was suspended for one whole season, and then he finally comes back and plays, and he's not the guy that you thought that you were paying. So it becomes a really dangerous thing for the organization to commit all that money to a player if you're unsure. And there's uncertainties with Jordan Love. He played a kind of okay, I'm not going to say bad, but an okay first half of last season. and had an outstanding second half of the season. So there's definitely uncertainty. But it really boils down to three options for the Green Bay Packers and Jordan Love. And I could go through this whole spiel and we can get a notification at the end of this video that he gets signed. So I do want to preface that this deal will happen and it could happen any minute. But here's where I think that things are kind of at with this whole ordeal. First off, if you can either decide to give Jordan Love an even larger signing bonus, and this will stretch some of that money. Maybe you're not giving them fully guaranteed, but you're giving them a $40-50 million signing bonus right off the shoot. That satisfies a lot of that guaranteed money concerns and then stretches out that money over the next 4, 5, 6 years, however long of a contract they give them. But it also really tightens up the cap space that they have to do anything more in the next, 1, 2, 3 years. So that's one option. I don't see Green Bay entertaining that. Number two, you can guarantee that money in the future seasons, which the Packers just historically avoid. They don't like to guarantee money past 1 year. And we can look at an onslaught of Green Bay Packers they have players who they've let go because of the contract structures and not wanting to pay anybody a guaranteed salary after an X amount of time. So really it boils down to option number three. And that's really to just get creative with how they do this contract. And what I mean by that is they got creative with Aaron Rodgers' contract extension where they maybe, they deferred some of that money to later and one key, but they also create opportunities for signing bonuses and, workout bonuses. They can give him kind of a guaranteed income for, showing up and participating in events that he's going to show up and participate in anyway. So whether it's OTA practices, whether it's mini camp practices, whatever the case is, things where he's just going to be there regardless. So he's going to get an X amount of a bonus and an X amount of bonus every time. So they can stack these things up, maybe complete 60% of that's or a little bit. Hopefully you complete 60% of passes, but complete 50% of passes and you'll get this much money. Throw for 30 touchdowns, you get this much money. They can kind of get creative in how they structure their contract and give him bonuses. But it's just going to be a kind of a weird and unique structure when this whole thing comes out and it's said and done. I do expect him to be, the reports are just crazy from what we were talking about last week. It sounds like he could very well be the highest paid quarterback in NFL history. And we have to take all that with a grain of salt too. Just like with Justin Jefferson's record-breaking wide receiver contract, that's all fine and dandy. It doesn't last long. So I think whatever, make Love the highest paid quarterback. We can shoot off fireworks and he can celebrate whatever, but that's not going to matter in 6 months to a year because there will be the Dak Prescotts of the world. There will be the Tua Tagovailoa, which I still can't pronounce, of the world. Those contracts will come. But I think when this contract does come out, he will be making 55, 56 million a year. And it's just going to be what's that guaranteed salary that the Packers are willing to put forward with them. So thoughts? Do you think? Are you seeing what I'm seeing as far as some of these reports about this
Yeah,
contract?
I'm seeing the same kind of talk that you are about he's probably going to be one of the, if not the top paid quarterback in the league once they get something done, which, like you said, that only means anything for a short period of time because the next quarterback is going to need a contract reworked or contract extension, and
More.
he's going to want to
Yep.
be above what Jordan Love ends up being at. So it's a little annoying, honestly, seeing all these, you get the notification, this quarterback becomes the highest paid quarterback in NFL history. I mean, how many times a year do we see that? How many times a season
Yeah.
or an off season do we see that? It doesn't really mean anything. But yeah, ESPN, Jordan Love is one of the trending topics right now. And from what I was listening to them say, it sounds like they think that he should be in that top tier as far as how much he's getting paid annually or total contract, whatever it ends up being. But yeah, I'm seeing that same stuff. In the options that you kind of just went through, what do you think is the best option for the organization?
I'm of the mindset that I'm not afraid to pay this guy. I really am not. And having a channel and putting your thoughts like Preston Smith is not going to get cut. The training camp, thoughts like that out on the internet for it to live and breathe and make yourself a fool. That's fine. But I feel comfortable in saying that I think we're good. I think we found our guy. I I I don't really have a of course, there's always gonna be a little bit of a shadow of a doubt there, but I think you pay the guy. I'm not a big fan of fully guaranteed contracts, so I will say that. I think what they did with Kirk Cousins in Minnesota where I mean, that was a guaranteed, what, 95, 100 million? It was a little less than $100 million that they gave him, which was a huge contract and a big deal back then. Not a fan of that because of the player. Never was a huge Kirk Cousins fan. What he did in Washington really never wowed me enough to say, okay, he regardless of what he does, deserves all this money. I think that's stupid. But you look at you give this guy guaranteed money not just for who he is and what he kind of excelled at for half of a season. You give this guy guaranteed money because of what's around him. Now, we're going to break into some of the headlines from training camp, but we're talking about you have a head coach that has been there 5, 6 years. That's established. You have a front office that is capable and consistent for what 2, 3 decades of continuing to have a team that is competitive year in and year out. You have an entire roster. You bring in Josh Jacobs on offense. You have young receivers. What I'm getting at is there is enough around him that you're not just throwing guaranteed money at him to appease him and be the highest paid and not go out there and win any championships. With Jordan Love and this roster, this isn't hyperbole. I mean, we can be a really good team heading into 2024 season and beyond. That's why you pay the guy. You lock them in, you make them happy, you make sure it structures correctly for the organization so they're not, strapped and can go out and make additional signings. And truthfully, the Packers have some of the best, Russ Ball and the entire front office and the financial side of it have this figured out. But you go out there and make sure that you lock them in. Don't stress about picking up additional players in the near future, and go out there and get competitive. And let's win some Super Bowls. Pay the guy. I'm on the board. I'm not saying fully guaranteed, but 70% guaranteed. Sure. I mean, why not pay the guy and let's lock him in, make him
Yeah,
happy,
I like
lock
that.
him
I
in.
like that a lot. I like the idea that you're not paying him just to appease him. I totally agree with that. You're paying him to be
Mhm.
there's if they pay him guarantee 75% of the money, whatever it ends up being. They're they're giving him that because they're saying, all right, this is our guy. This is the leader of our young team. This team's going to grow together, and this is the head of that team. This is their number one guy that they're playing for the rest of the team. So I like that a lot. The idea that they're not giving him the guarantee
You
just
know,
to appease him, to make him come to practice. You're paying him because he's your guy for the future.
and I don't know, and I'm just kind of guessing that you're done talking because I don't see your lips moving because there was some cut out there, just to be honest with you. But I don't know if this guaranteed money thing is, I mean, it seems like more of a recent movement in the NFL over the last 4 or 5 years. But I pulled up Patrick Mahomes' contract extension that he signed in 2020. And if you recall, that was a 10-year, $450 million contract. And that was huge. Like his guaranteed money in that contract is only 63 million out of the $450 million contract. So on the flip side of the coin, Patrick Mahomes has this contract on the table that says I have job security for the next 10 years, for the next decade. I'm going to be a chief for the rest of my life. And he doesn't really have to worry about making, that guaranteed aspect of the money because he has that job security along the way. As long as he goes out there, he performs. And this was a solid and outrageous contract when it came out 4 years ago. I think that shorter that term is, if it's a 3 year, it's going to be higher guaranteed money. If it's a 5, 6 year contract, it's going to be lower guaranteed money. And you just kind of have to see how it all shakes out. I think the Packers ideally probably don't want to go longer than 4 years on their contract. And so with that, they're probably looking at 70 to 80% of that guaranteed. But I'm sure Love wants, if you're going to only offer me 4 years, I want all of it guaranteed. So that's the back and forth that's going on, I'm sure. And they're not just sitting around not talking over these last 2 days of training camp while Love is actively there in practice. There are talks going on, but it's just the fine details of where do we ultimately want this contract to fall. and it's gonna happen. It's just a matter of how it's structured out. Did you see any of the reactions from fans on social media or just Packers fans in general with this whole Jordan Love not
To be
practicing?
honest, I haven't seen a ton of it. I've had a sick kid and been stuck at home with them for the last few days, so I haven't been on my phone a ton checking that stuff out. So I haven't
Yeah.
seen a ton of reaction, but I can assume that there's a lot on either side of things. I'm sure there's a lot of people that are talking getting rid of him already because of this and just craziness.
Yeah, it is, and I was a little bit surprised. I mean, I think one thing Jordan Love did extremely well last year is that he got the buy-in of the fans fairly quickly into the season. And we might have touched upon that last week in our episode, but just the fact that the entire fan base really seemed to rally around this guy early on. And yeah, there were some bumps along the road, but it was kind of like the whole Brett Favre or Brent Favre, or it was definitely a mixed bag of reactions. I kind of read through all the comments that came to. I posted to couple different Facebook groups, the breaking news or the developing story, and yeah, I mean, just like with anything in life, it's kind of a 50-50 approach. You have half the fan base saying, "Oh no, another drama queen," just like Rodgers. I thought we got rid of the drama, or he played one half of a good season. Why is he holding out for a contract? Why don't you go out and earn your paycheck? And then the other side of it, complete opposite. Why don't you just pay the guy? Pay the guy. We have a quarterback. Pay the guy. So dive into that, I guess, is what I'm getting at. Just look into some. I mean, none of it probably, truthfully, none of it matters. It's just satire and stupid entertainment. But to see the little bit of a split, I guess I was just taken by surprise that there was so much negative feedback from the Packers fan base that he wasn't signing a contract or that he wasn't practicing. Good for him. I mean, he's there. It's a hold-in. Yeah, if he would not show up to training camp, the NFL requires that you fine a player $50,000 a day. I think it's a day. I don't know. I didn't look that, but up to $50,000 if they don't show up. Because he showed up but not practicing, the Packers can fine him up to $50,000. But as I put in my notes, and I'm sure you're well aware
Oh,
of, they're not going to do it. They won't fine him. They're working this out. It's a very amicable situation. They're figuring it out, but he's doing it right. He's doing it the right way. He's done everything the right way, and he's even doing this the right way. Quite frankly, it's a
yeah.
beautiful thing to
Yeah,
see.
I
Pay the
agree.
guy.
I'm not surprised that there are so many polarized responses to, in the comments on your post. That's how social media is, right? You got people all the way on this side of the out of the spectrum
Yeah,
and everyone on the other side of the spectrum. I mean, my suggestion to those people would be tune into this episode and see the explanation and see what's actually going on because we've actually looked into it a little bit. A lot of those people commenting are people that just they see a headline and they react to it. They don't even read the article, they don't even research into what's going on. So I'm not surprised that there was so many differing opinions on it, but that's just the way it's going to be. That's how social media is everywhere.
yeah. They're not the crazy Packer fans that decide to purchase some swag and upgrade their internet connection and start a podcast on YouTube. No, they're the ones that are going to show up on game day. They'll probably tailgate a little. They might have an opinion on whether or not we should have let Jordy Nelson go back in the day, but they're not. They're whatever. I digress. We're not getting into it. But someone did sign a contract. So on Sunday, which kind of made this whole storyline even more interesting, is that on Sunday,
Mhm.
Kenny Clark and the Green Bay Packers agreed on a 3-year, $64 million extension, which, you know, those talks also were occurring since late February around that combine time. It was kind of off my radar, and I don't know why it was off my radar, but Kenny Clark was heading into his final season. 24 would have been his last year under contract. He was due to make $11 million this season if he had finished out his contract. But with this 3-year extension, again, $64 million, that bumps up to a $29 million salary in 2024. Does he? I mean, my question to you: Did did you know that Kenny Clark's contract or was in his final season? Because it caught me off guard, and B or two, Are I mean, is it a good thing? Are you excited about that? Does he
Well,
deserve
to
it?
answer your first question, no, I had no idea. Like I said before, I don't pay super close attention to the contract stuff. I mean, also like you said, I probably should have known that he was in his last year of his contract. To answer your second question, do I think it's a good thing? Yeah, I think it's a great thing. I think Kenny Clark is a staple in the center of that defense. I think he makes plays. He's a big proponent in the run stopping on the defense. So I think it's a good thing that we solidified that, and he's going to be around for a while longer because these guys are. I mean, they've been around for a few years now. They've developed, they've established themselves, and they're not no name players anymore. Like you can talk to fans of other teams and mention Kenny Clark's name, and they know who you're talking about because he's been around and he's established himself as a solid defensive lineman. So I think it's a great thing. I mean, obviously, as many of these guys as we can keep for a long time, the better. Because the team that they've built is, like you said before, I think we've got potential to win some championships with this team.
He's 28 years old. So, I mean, this is probably the last contract extension that I'm sure Green Bay is going to offer him. Really, what this contract tells me is so he's locked up through the 27 season. I mean, he's good for 24, good for 25. That 26 season is going to be kind of that make or break of, what we kind of get out of him. But it for sure locks him up for the next 3 years, and then they kind of have that fourth year where I don't see the Packers signing a interior defensive lineman who's going to be 33 years old. At that point, the career is typically starting to go downhill, and that's probably where they let him go. But we have him in his prime right now, or still at a high level right now. I I went through his stat muse. I use stat muse a lot for kind of getting statistics off of players and whatnot. I mean, one thing that jumped out to me is that he's consistent. And what I mean by that is he's very seldomly not playing. He's in the game. He doesn't get hurt very often. His In 2020, he only played 13 games. That was his lowest out of all of the seasons, and he started back in 2016. But in 21, he played every single game. In 22, every single game. 23, every single game. He's averaging somewhere right around 27 to 28 tackles. He's got somewhere around an average of 7 sacks a season. So, I mean, he's a veteran player. He's a Pro Bowler. He is a name. I would argue that he's maybe not as, I think he's popular enough in the NFC North for people that have to match up against him twice a year, and maybe Vikings fans and Packers fans. I don't know if he's that big of a name in the NFL. Like if you talk to a Commanders fan or a Dolphins fan, they probably wouldn't know who Kenny Clark is. But he's definitely someone that I'm excited to see come back. He has the experience. He adds veteran leadership to that defensive line. There's a lot of young faces all across that defensive line. I think it's a good signing as well, but completely caught me off guard. I've been on the Bleacher Report notifications like crazy, like the last week, especially with training camp starting. And when I saw like Packers Inc. extension, I thought for sure it was Jay Love, but no, Kenny Clark. Kenny Clark's contract was up, caught me off guard. And I think it was a solid contract for the Packers to sign on and agree with and keep him on that defensive line. All right, so let's transition from the talk of contracts, which has taken up the entire first half of this video, and maybe I should talk a little bit about training camp. So training camp kicked off at 10:30 a.m. Monday morning. Some of the headlines in the news wire. We got competitions that we can discuss, and we got some players and injury reports that we can discuss. It's probably going to be a mixture of two of them because I don't know the best way to describe these, but probably one of the more notable players that kind of came off the list and is back at practice is offensive lineman Zach Tom. Now, this is a player that let me just start here. I'm going to probably set you up, which is going to happen a lot on this show, but what do you know about Zach Tom?
Who?
I know, right? Zach, you pretty much, I know you nailed it. You nailed it on the head. Now, there's not a lot on Stat Muse about Zach Tom, which is hilarious. But he came in. Yeah, he was brought in the Packers. He played the full 22 season. had 9 games played. Last season, he started in all 17 games, played all 17 games. An offensive lineman that you know, I think all the talk in the past couple of seasons, there was David Bakhtiari was a big name on that offensive line, and then we had, please help me for the love of God, Elton Jenkins is the other offensive lineman, and then we've kind of been rotating some players out. We had Rasheed Walker step in. We had, oh man, who's the guy with the dread that was the right tackle that we picked up from the Broncos a couple of years ago? He's
It
gone,
was
but
Billy something,
don't
right?
remember. Don't remember. No,
Yeah.
Billy Turner, thank you so much for just giving me something to go off of. So there's been shuffle and movement on this offensive line. What I'm getting at is Zach Tom is probably one of the more under the radar offensive linemen that I did not even track, and you clearly don't know a whole lot about. He's going to be a staple. He's kind of one of those shoe-in positions or shoe-in players for somewhere amongst that offensive line. I saw a statistic come out just in the last couple of days. So last year in 125 pass blocking matchups, and this is against Cameron Jordan, not a bad player, Aiden Hutchinson, he's aight, and then TJ Watt, all these games last year. In 125 passing block attempts against those 3 guys, he gave up 9 quarterback pressures and 0 sacks. I mean, he plays Aiden Hutchinson twice a year. And then each of the other 2 players, Cameron Jordan and TJ Watt, they have matchups. So we're looking at a span of 4 games. I mean, those are some pretty awesome statistics for an offensive lineman against that caliber for a player. He's not a full participant in 11 on 11s, but he's back on drills. He had a torn pectoral that kept him out of the spring session. He's back. He's on the field getting ready. And there's probably a matter of time until they put him in the rotation. But unless you have any other insight on Zach Tom, which I'm doubting you do, because you probably just heard his name for the first
Well,
time
so what
tonight. That's a pretty big, pretty
what I
big.
will say about that is no, when you said his name, I didn't know who he was, but for an offensive lineman, that's a good thing. That means that in broadcasts, in media and stuff like that, if he's not being talked about, that means he's probably doing his job, because offensive linemen don't get a whole lot of media attention. They don't get their name called in the broadcast. So if his name's not being called and he's not being talked about, that means he's probably just doing his job the right way, which I played offensive line in high school, so I respect offensive linemen. I think they are if not the most important position on the team. So not hearing his name, not knowing who he is, that's a good thing.
I would agree with you that offensive line is the most important, probably the most important position on the team. This is a passing league. It's keeping your $171 million guaranteed quarterback healthy throughout the season. That does not happen unless you have an offensive line that protects them. It's the reason why the quarterbacks buy 75-inch OLED flat screens for their offensive linemen or golf carts for David Bakhtiari. There's a reason why quarterbacks appreciate their offensive line. And I think you might not know who the guy is, Christian, but that was dead on accurate. That if you don't know his name, that's probably a good thing. It means that you're not hearing his name come up over and over that shit. Zach Tom missed a pass rush and Jordan Love just is eating grass. That's a good thing that you don't want to hear about any of your offensive linemen. Regardless, he is back. He is healthy or on the mend and an active participant in the drills at training camp. Some of the other injury things that I guess we can just kind of get into worth mentioning. Tight end Tucker Kraft, also a torn pec. He started on the do not participate or did not practice. They're not too concerned about Tucker Kraft. He should be probably, I wouldn't expect him this week yet, but possibly mid to late next week of coming back. You have Jaden Reed. That was kind of a surprise that he's not practicing currently. He actually had a freak accident during a summer football camp. And again, Goody doesn't expect him to be out long, but I guess he didn't have the right shoes on during this summer football camp and he hurt his toe. So not a guy that I want to see missing reps or with practice, but nonetheless, he is not on the field right now. Rookie running back Marshawn Lloyd. That one's a little bit, this one's interesting to me. So he has he's out for a hip concern, not practicing, not a lot of, there's not a lot of feedback that I'm hearing from Goody or Matt LaFleur on this one, and I'm not really sure. There's no background on how he acquired a hip injury. That one I think is something that I want to keep my eye on over the next couple of weeks and even throughout the regular season. Hips are not usually something that are reoccurring like a hamstring that are going to keep coming up, but it's just kind of a weird thing that to see out of a rookie. And then we have Corey Ballantyne, hamstring, and then a couple other offensive linemen. I'm not even going to name their names because you don't know who they are. But of of those players, is there anyone that jumps out to you as maybe, you know, not necessarily concerned about their injury, but, who's the most important person on that list that needs to get out there and on the field
Reed for
taking
sure.
reps?
Reed for sure is the most important one that needs to be out there on the field, but he also needs Jordan Love to be on the field. I think the two of them need to be on the field building that rapport, building
Right.
that relationship that they started with last year. So him being out to start training camp isn't as big of a deal because Jordan Love's not on the field either. The Marshawn Lloyd injury was a surprise to me as well, and I watched Matt LaFleur's press conference before practice this morning, and he didn't have a whole lot to say about it. And we may not need to read into that too much because one thing that I believe it was Matt LaFleur commented after practice today was he was talking about AJ Dillon and how AJ Dillon's in the best shape of his life right now, which we talked about last week, how it looks like he's
Right.
lost some weight. He looks like an animal out there. So Marshawn Lloyd, if AJ Dillon is in peak performance condition right now, Lloyd might not see the field as much anyway. So it'll be, like you said, it'll be interesting to follow that storyline. If he's got a more serious injury, you know, obviously Dillon's going to be on the field more.
With Marshawn Lloyd, he's got a roster spot. He's hit in the 53-man roster unless they put him on the injury reserve or something like that, which we're not even close to anything like that. So don't even worry about it. But I look at him, I look at Reed, I look at Kraft. These are three players, mostly minor injuries. They'll get on the field here. And you're exactly right. It doesn't matter with Reed unless Jordan Love's on the field. He needs to be developing those reps. And I know that they practice together in the offseason. Same thing with Tucker Kraft. But these three guys in particular, go ahead. Take a week off to start camp, hit it hard in preseason, whatever the case is. They're going to be fine. Their jobs aren't in line. The name that jumps out to me is Corey Ballantyne. That's a guy that needs to be healthy. He needs to be practicing. He needs to be on the field. I mean, if you're looking at the depth chart, Corey Ballantyne's probably around that 4 or 5 spot, heading into preseason as far as that depth chart. But that's a very competitive group right now throughout the entire training camp. They're looking for that number 2 opposite of Jair Alexander. It kind of seems like Eric Stokes is going to be that guy, but only because he's the most experienced and injuries have set him back this far in his career. But that's a very competitive group. And if Ballantyne is going to miss hamstring concern, which we are well aware that is an injury that can keep you out longer than what you want to be, that's a guy that if he doesn't get on the field sooner than later, you're looking at maybe practice squad, if not a complete cut, because he's not getting any of those reps. He needs to get out there and be on the field. That's going to be important for him.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how long he's out because it is very competitive. It's probably the one of the most competitive spots on the team right now.
If it's not the cornerback group, what do you think is the next most competitive position on
That
the
safety
roster right
spot
now?
opposite Xavier McKinney, that's going to be one to watch all training camp. It'll be interesting to see who's getting the reps early on in training camp. I believe Bullard, the rookie, was he started with the ones
Yep.
today, or was that Monday?
So yeah, you got to remember this post's on Wednesday, so you got to use actual
Whoops.
days. But yeah, Bullard was Monday. He was paired with, and we can get into some of the competitions here underway. It was a good segue that you just naturally did. You're such a pro, it's like you've been doing this for 15 years, Christian. Yeah, Javon Bullard was paired with Xavier McKinney and the ones all of Monday. However, on day 2, which was Tuesday, it was actually 4th round draft pick Evan Williams, who was with the ones, and then they had another, like late round draft pick that was paired with the twos. So I see what the Packers are doing. I do. I mean, competition, competition, competition. I understand. Javon Bullard got to be the clear favorite at that next safety position. Looking at his film, looking at the college that he came from and his pedigree, I think it's his job to lose. With that being said, probably one of the most memorable comments to come out of day 1, which was Monday again. They asked Bullard, "Are you comfortable within this offense?" Or excuse me, on the defense. And his quote is, "I don't like using that word comfortable because as soon as you get comfortable, that's when you lose your job." And that's probably one of the more memorable quotes to come out. It's that mindset. And you, like you said, you watched that Matt LaFleur interview this morning. That's how that thing started out. Excuse me, Tuesday morning. That's how that thing started out. And Matt did not actually hear that quote until it was brought up in that press conference, and he said it got him fired up. That I would agree. Cornerback, safety, they're going to be rotating, and whoever gets that next spot by Xavier McKinney is going to be crucial. But it's got to be Bullard, right? It's his job
Yeah,
to
I
lose,
think
isn't it?
so. I think so at this point. But he's not the only safety they drafted this year, so you may see some of the later round draft pick safeties start to make a name for themselves. It's so early. It's like him running with the ones on the first couple of days.
No, we're picking players on the roster, Christian. It is happening right.
And Preston Smith will not be with the Packers next year.
Calling it.
And no,
I can't. If I had a time
it's
machine,
so early on. So it's hard to know, but it doesn't say a whole lot, but it does say something that he on day 1 was starting with the ones. So like you said, it may be his job to lose, but there's a lot of preseason left to sift through. So we'll see how the rest of the summer pans out for him. The other position that I'm interested to watch during training camp is the linebacker position opposite Quay Walker. I saw that McDuffie was running
yep.
with the ones these first couple of days, but we got some higher round draft pick linebackers that I'll be interested to see if they start working in during training camp with the first team.
Yeah, there's a lot of areas that this conversation can go when you talk about that linebacker group and kind of the front line in general. You look at the Packers, go to Packers.com, look up their rosters. They kind of clump your linebackers and your defensive line all into one group. Quite frankly, I mean they put here. Let me just pull this up real quick because I was surprised. If you look at defensive line, you have names like Kingsley and Gambare, which I would have assumed was a linebacker. You have Lucas Van Ness, who I would have listed as a linebacker. You have Preston Smith, that I would have listed as a linebacker. But in the Packers listing of these players, they're defensive linemen. What I'm getting at is here, it's kind of a group in general in that whole kind of clusterfuck of what you want to call a defensive lower backfield there. And with that being said, I mean, what I'm realizing is there's competition all over and there's depth all over. And I think that's probably where I want to go with this conversation is that a lot of player interviews came out. I don't want to get past the competition, but one thing that Xavier McKinney brought up in his interview on Tuesday was him and who was it? Keyshawn Nixon we're talking in practice either yesterday or today. I did the same thing you did. We're terrible at talking about Monday or Tuesday, but they talked about this week that defensive line is crazy and filled with depth. And I guess what I'm trying to get at, I'm doing a terrible job getting there, is that there's going to be rotations inside and outside of that. You look at how Isaiah McDuffie started opposite side Quay Walker today. There's going to be injuries. There's going to be movements. There's going to be different formations. I think everyone is going to have a huge role in that. And to your point, it's early on in training camp. They're going to be testing out different packages and groups throughout all of training camp and seeing how these guys pair together. But I don't know. I'm rambling. Let's break down these competitions real quick. So We talked about cornerbacks. Eric Stokes was the first one to start the 11 on 11s with the number one defense. Carrington Valentine is the kind of the rotating in player. We talked about the safety position. We talked about the Isaiah McDuffie alongside Quay Walker on day one. Sean Runyon got the initial nod at the right guard position. And then Jordan Morgan, the first round draft pick, was actually rotating in. So there's a lot of, I think Jordan Morgan is going to be a slow burn. I don't
Really?
see him being a day one starter come week one. And then with Zach Tom limited, veteran Andre Dillard, who they signed free agency this offseason, I believe they picked him up from the Tennessee Titans. He got the opportunity at right tackle. And then there's one more competition I'm going to hold off on for a sec. But yeah, I don't think Jordan Morgan is a day one starter week one against the Eagles
okay.
in Brazil.
So you say day one starter, but we talked about this last week, how last season, the Packers had an approach to the offensive line that I haven't seen before, rotating guys in every other drive or, even on the same drive. So I can see him certainly being one of those guys that's rotated in regularly. I mean, with the news that he's been rotating in training camp already. If they take that same approach to their offensive line, rotate guys in and out, make sure they're fresh, make sure they stay healthy. He may not be the starter out there, but I can see him getting a lot of playing time if he continues to perform. Like, obviously they see something in him to rotate him in with the ones right now. So if that continues, I don't see why he wouldn't rotate in regular season, which, so calling him a day one starter, sure, maybe not, but I mean if they rotate guys in and out consistently like they did last year, I think he's one of those guys.
Okay. Let me rephrase it then. Do you think Jordan Morgan plays a snap in week one, not because of injury, but if the offensive line is healthy, does Jordan Morgan play a snap in week one? And if not, when does he play a snap?
Gosh. I mean, right now I say yes, but again, we're so early on. It's week one of training camp. It's hard to make these. It's hard to make bets on this type of stuff. I'm not gonna.
We can circle back around
Sure.
at the end of training camp,
Sure.
but this is what it's all about. And it alludes back to what I was bringing up last week. And he doesn't need to start. He doesn't need to play. He's there to grow and develop. He's a high pick, obviously first round pick in a draft that has a skill set that is raw, that needs tuning and training, and there's a high ceiling for Jordan Morgan. I mean, you tell me next year he'll be a starter. I'm not going to question that whatsoever. He'll be a starter. But I don't think he's a guy that gets a whole lot of snaps very early on in the season. And I don't see the offensive line as a position that really rotates out unless of injury. Typically, that's one of those groups of men that they put out on the field. They start to build continuity. They build, I don't know, another word for continuity. They have a culture, I guess, amongst them. That's not a position that you. Am I wrong? Am I reading this wrong? Do you typically see offensive lines rotate players in and out throughout the course of a game? Or I just don't feel like I ever see that unless
No,
there's an injury that comes up.
That's my point. So last year, the Packers doing that, rotating guys in, it was something I had never seen before. But when I saw it, I was like, why wouldn't you do this? This seems like a great idea. Granted, like you said, they did that because of injury. It was because they were running short on offensive linemen, so they had to rotate guys in and out. But I think they should continue to do that. I think it worked well. I think they could, revolutionize the way an offensive line works. And I agree with you that there's a continuity and rapport that these these
Yeah.
offensive
Word.
linemen build with each other, and that's why I think a lot of teams don't rotate guys in and out like that, because these guys see it as, okay, these are the 5 guys that we roll with, and we do everything together. But the way to circumvent that is just bring in 2 or 3 more guys into that circle, so then it doesn't matter who's standing next to them. They have trust in each other. So if they rotate these guys in regularly during training camp and practice and everything, then they're going to build trust with more than just the 5, and then they can during the season rotate them in and out and keep guys fresh, keep them healthy. I think it'd be a great way to do it. Who knows if they continue it? It may have just been something they had to do because of injury last year. But in my opinion, I think it's something they should at least explore the idea of continuing to do that. But I'm not on the coaching staff, so not
No,
yet.
no, you're
Not yet.
not. Neither am I. And there, yeah. I mean, I'm looking at their offensive line, roster right here. As we talked about Zach Tom healthy, he's going to be one of the 5 on that line. Josh Myers at center, that one's pretty much a lock. That's kind of his job to lose. Elton Jenkins, it's not even his job to lose. That's a lock. And then so you're looking at that left tackle to kind of fill in the shoes of David Bakhtiari. Rasheed Walker, real rough start, I thought, last year. It was kind of like a concern for a bit there. Like, oh God, is he going to be okay? I think he actually put together an overall pretty good season. So I think he's kind of that front runner for that left tackle position. And then there's, really one more spot to kind of fill. I don't think this Andre Diller guy maybe has a resurgence in his career and he makes that line. There's a position, I guess, is what I'm getting at for Jordan Morgan that if he shines enough, he can get in there. But I don't necessarily, I just don't know if it's going to happen. Any closing thoughts on the offensive line? Because I do want to get to probably the most exciting position competition that we're going to
Yeah,
see
I guess
throughout
the only
training
thing
camp.
that I'm thinking of now that, something that I haven't in my opinion that I just gave, something that I don't consider a lot of times is the money side of things. So contract incentives. So that's something at the NFL level that me personally, as a I played football in high school, and my thought process a lot to do with the I don't know, the camaraderie of the team or the brotherhood
Brotherhood?
type aspect, but in the NFL there is a little bit more that they're playing for. So it may not be that may be a reason why they don't do the whole rotate thing if there's incentives involved with, how many games these guys start, how many pass protections they have, that type of stuff. If they have bonuses involved, then it's a lot harder to say, "Hey, I know you're one play away from hitting a bonus, but we're going to rotate you out and put this guy in," type of thing. So yeah, that's one reason why they may not do that. That I just thought of as we were talking about it.
Yeah, there's not a lot of big contracts on that offensive line right now. I mean, obviously Bakhtiari. I mean, if you're a solid left tackle in the NFL, you're getting
Hmm.
paid a shit ton of money. Bakhtiari proved that a couple of years ago and then got hurt. Good thing they didn't give him a whole bunch of guaranteed money, but I digress. The only real player on that offensive line is that deserves that money is Elton Jenkins. He's been, I mean, since his rookie year, that's a guy that came in and immediately had an impact and was a pass blocker. So I mean, I don't, there's again a delay. I don't know if we're talking about contracts on the offensive line or not, but I think most of that's interchangeable. A center doesn't eat up a whole lot of money these days. That could change. A right tackle or right guard doesn't eat up a whole lot of money. Again, because Jordan Love, right-handed, is primarily looking that direction. It's the blind side on the left tackle that's going to be the most crucial. And hopefully Jordan Morgan can be that guy that lives up to the hype. I mean, a first-round draft pick on an offensive lineman is the most unsexy thing that you can do. You want that star receiver, you want that quarterback, whatever the case may be. But it's that definitely that draft pick that that makes or breaks your NFL future for an organization. What also makes or breaks the future, and we saw this in the NFC divisional round last year, is the kicking competition. So we have ourselves, this is probably the most entertaining of the competitions going on right now. We have 3 kickers currently competing for that position, the one roster spot, if you will, at the end of training camp. And after Monday's news, it kind of seemed like they would have more of a unique approach to it. But after Tuesday's practice in the pouring rain, I actually don't even know if they got any kicks off with how much it was raining on Tuesday. But they have 3 kickers, and they're James Turner, who was claimed off of waivers from the Lions after minicamp. He was the only kicker that had an opportunity to kick on Monday. He went 4 for 6 from distances ranging from 33 to 46 yards. Not the greatest thing that you want to see in training camp. You kind of want at least 5 out of 6 at the very worst. He missed from 43 and 46. Probably a reason why the Lions cut this guy. Obviously, you have Greg Joseph, who is also there competing for a job. And then we have Anders Carlson coming back from last year as the kicking competition, or as the kind of the lead dog, his job to lose. What are your thoughts on the kicking competition? I'm excited about it personally. I think, like I alluded to at the start of this, probably the difference between us making a trip to the NFC Championship game and not was a little bit of some suspect kicking. Do you have your eyes on this competition at all? Is there any interest? Do you feel like it's already locked up? What are your overall thoughts on
Yeah,
the
I
kicking
agree with you. It's
competition?
something that I'm going to be paying attention to. Not only that playoff game, but there were multiple games during last season that I think were won or lost on the kicking game. Um, if you look at a lot of the Packers' losses last season, there were kicking situations where a field goal was missed or an extra point was missed. I mean, how do you have the stat on how many extra points Anders Carlson missed last year? Which should not happen. It's an extra point should never be missed. I don't whenever it happens in a game, doesn't matter what team it is, it's it just seems ridiculous to me that that they miss an extra point. It should be a chip shot for these guys who are getting paid to kick. So yeah, I'm excited to see the competition.
You make it
Oh,
sound so
by no
easy.
means do I think that I could do it, but they get paid a lot of money. I know they don't get paid what Jordan Love's going to get
They
paid,
do.
but they make more money than I do, so they should be proficient in their field, right? And I understand that there's going to be misses, but there was a lot of situations last season where there was a very important field goal or extra point that made the difference in the game. And we got to have somebody that's going to come through in that situation. So I think it's good that they brought in competition for Carlson. We'll see who comes out on top, and it may not be any of these 3 guys. You may see, a signing later in the season if they can't figure out
You're right.
who's going to be their solid guy day in and day out. So it's right now it's these 3, but it could be a different guy in the future.
See, I have that mindset that, to an extent, this whole thing is smoke and mirrors. And what I mean by that is they spent a draft pick on Anders Carlson previous year, 23 draft. You know, they said all the right things throughout the season. He's the guy. We're not going to lose hope. He's going through growing pains. He's our kicker. It didn't take very long for the season to end. They bring in Greg Joseph. I mean, what are we doing? Is Greg Joseph really a threat for any kicker in NFL? I mean, yeah. If there's one thing that the Minnesota Vikings have been able to really accomplish over the last 10 to 15 years is that they are not capable of finding a kicker worth anything. And if they let this guy go, I don't know. What are we doing? And then you look at the Lions. Now, they do have a good kicker on their team. I'm not even going to try to pretend that I know his name, but they 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 let him go minicamp. That's probably the most competition that they have, but it's all smoke and mirrors. This is a job that, yes, I'm very interested to see how this pans out. I think they had some kicking sessions at the end of OTAs where Anders Carlson kicked a field goal and it was like 48, 50 yards, whatever the case is. And the entire team rallied behind him and jumped up and down. The team wants him to succeed. He's more of the Packer than maybe the rest of the guys that are competing for that job. But there is a concern there. Last season, his first full season, he went 27 for 33 on field goals. And to the point that you brought up, he went 34 for 39 on extra points. And it's, yeah, the extra points are only a point, but those can be a huge difference in the NFL between, there's so much that goes into it. If you miss a field goal, all of a sudden, maybe now you are going for it on, it just changes your whole game plan. It just to have that 1 point versus, okay, we're down by 4 instead of we're down by 3. And now we need to strategize completely different. So there's a lot of factors that go into that. Yeah, as far as what the plan is at kicker, Gutekunst was quoted as saying that as when it came to how long are they going to keep 3 kickers in camp, his quote was, as long as it takes, we'll keep churning it and moving down that road until somebody wins it. And then Matt LaFleur said today that there is no timetable, hopefully, sooner than later, but there's no direct timetable as far as when they're going to get this whole kicking thing cleaned up. And this is going to be something that goes all the way down to roster cut. It'll be interesting to see if they run with 3 the entire month of August, or if they narrow this down to 2, or to your point, if they bring in someone completely different somewhere along the line to compete. There's a lot of moving variables, but I think one thing is certain is that Carlson will be one of the guys competing until the roster cut portion. It's just whether or not he'll be the one that ultimately wins the competition or not. So let's talk about player interviews. There's a couple of them over the first 2 days. It was primarily offense on Monday, defense on Tuesday. We got to see Christian Watson speak on Monday, Josh Jacobs on Monday, and then the notable ones for me on day 2, which was Tuesday, was Xavier McKinney, Lucas Van Ness. I assume you listened to these. Maybe you didn't listen to all of them. You listened to a few of them. Anything you took away from the player interviews?
So Rashawn Gary was interviewed Tuesday, I believe it was. ESPN does a training camp breakdown each day and what takeaways are from training camp that day. And Tuesday's breakdown was all about Rashawn Gary. He was the main takeaway from the day. So he had looked really good against the offense. He had, I believe, 3 sacks on 4 plays or something like that. Granted, they're not in pads or anything, but he's looking really good. And when he was interviewed, he was asked about what he likes about this new defense. And his main thing that he said was having a hand in the ground on the line of scrimmage, not having to worry about dropping back in pass coverage. So I think that's a big deal for the defense as a whole and Rashawn Gary specifically, because he's, over these last few years, he's really developed and become that top pass rusher on the team. And I think changing the defense to this 4-3 is going to make a huge difference in his ability to pressure the quarterback, sack the quarterback. Interesting stat in that breakdown today from ESPN. He's never had a double-digit sack season. Do we see that this year with him rushing the passer much more often in the new defense?
I'm going to answer that question. Let me just look up real quick his stats, because what I remember from Rashawn Gary in 2023 is that he was off to a super hot start. And I don't have it pulled up yet, but I remember he was either 4 sacks in 4 games or 5 sacks in 5 games. Like he was averaging a sack a game really on in the season. And then it kind of wore off a little bit there. Let me see here. So 2023, he had 3.5 sacks in the first 3 games, 4 in 5 games. And then he went on a stretch 1, 2, 3, 4 where he didn't get any. And then he finished off the season with 5 straight games where he didn't get any. And that's a tricky thing, right? I mean, the elite players, maybe we'll talk about like J.J. Watt of the day. Maybe we can talk about a Nick Bosa. I think Nick Bosa is for sure a current elite player at that position. they maintain consistency, and I think Rashawn Gary is I love him. I'm glad he's on our team. I think he has the right mindset. He says the right things. It's got to be consistency though. He had a hot start and then he went on stretches where he wasn't very effective. And of course, defenses are going to scheme accordingly, maybe put a running back over there to block, maybe,
He was injured
whatever
last
the
year
case
though,
is, an
wasn't
extra
he?
tight. No, in 23, he played in 17 games. So he was injured. If he was
Maybe I'm
dealing with an
thinking of the year
injury, which
before.
I have goldfish mentality and can't remember how severe it is. The year before in 22, he only played 9 games. So in 22, he was injured for sure. But in 23, he finished with a total of 9 sacks in 17 games. He's a playmaker. He was a playmaker at practice on Tuesday. He can be that type of guy every Sunday. The defense is going to be a problem for anyone that goes up against him. It's just going to be that consistency. He talks the talk. He's kind of like Jair, like in a certain respect, talk the talk, but can you walk the walk? You got to start to back it up at some point. This is going to be a year. I mean, he's got his contract extension or a new contract. This is his 5th year. Let's see if he can be consistent with it and bring it every day. He knows how good he can be. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. It's just a matter of if he will be. Will he bring it consistently? That's my biggest
Yeah,
question mark
and I
with
think
Rashawn Gary.
what he said about the change in the defense, I think that will allow him to have more consistency because in the previous defense, in Joe Barry's defense, he was dropping back into pass coverage on certain plays. In this defense, that doesn't happen near as often,
Yeah.
if at all. So I think we see more consistency out of him and more sacks, more pressures. That's what we want to see.
This defense is a huge question mark, not because of the talent on the team, but obviously what this defensive coordinator, Jeff Hafley, is going to bring into it. Xavier McKinney on the defense was saying that it's one of the best group of guys he's ever played with. And then on Hafley, he talked about how he does a great job with his overall message to the team. He has a very high energy level. He's aggressive with his play calling, and he's open to getting feedback from the players and has an open line of communication with the players. I like to see that out of Xavier McKinney. He's completely open to whoever's going to be lined up beside him and teaching all these guys the ropes. We haven't really, this is only our 2nd episode, so of course we haven't had much time to dive into it. But, Xavier McKinney, again, is such an awesome signing. Not only is he a talented football player, but he seems like a perfect type of player to come into Green Bay and really fits the mold of what we look for in our players. On the other hand, Lucas Van Ness, also a great player, coming into his 2nd year, also had great things to say about Hafley. Brings the energy every single day, does a fantastic job implementing the defense and building that culture in the building. I want to bring up those 2 defensive players quick and what they said, what their comments were, just primarily because of going off of Rashawn Gary. You're right. I think this defense could be, if they let all these guys loose and play at the top of their potential, we might not have to worry about needing to score more than 30 points a game to win a game. We might be fine if we score 17 points a game, and we'll win the game if this defense can really come together.
Yeah, that's an important piece. It's, the days of shootouts between Aaron Rodgers and whatever other quarterback he was having a shootout with, 30, 40-point games. That was fun seeing all the scoring, but that's not how you win consistently. You win consistently with a solid defense and an offense that can run the ball and score at will. It's going to be very important having a defense to complement the Jordan Love young offense. So I have high hopes for what the new defensive coordinator and the new additions on the defense, like McKinney. I agree with you 100%. McKinney seems like a very solid signing, not only the aspect that he was one of the best safeties in the league that was available, but also he's been kind of pushed into this leadership role on that defense with how young the Packers are in general. And he is moving into it effortlessly, which is awesome to see. Like you said, I think that he's a good fit for the organization and for the young guys around him. That's going to be really good for whoever ends up playing alongside him at that other safety position is going to be able to learn a lot, and they're, they can work off of each other that way.
We'll finish up here shortly, but for the longest time, it seems like this defense was a bend but don't
Yeah.
break sort of defense. We would give up a ton of yards, 300 to 400 yards a game. They'd get down to the red zone, and we'd be able to hold them to a field goal. And that was kind of how some of our best teams from 2016 to 2022, 2021, those were kind of our best defenses. Was okay, yep, they made a big play, but they tackled them within the 20, and we held them to a field goal. And that's kind of how we got by. Man, it would just be, we're just dreaming at this point. I'm dreaming at this point, but it would just be nice to have a consistent defense and be able to, maybe it's not every week you're holding opponents under 20 points a game, but a guy can dream, right?
Yeah.
That'd be pretty freaking awesome if that became a staple of score. You don't need to score 30 points to win a game. You just go out there and play better than the other team, like John Madden used to say, right?
Yeah,
Am I right?
think it goes back to what you said earlier when we were talking about Rashawn Gary. It comes back to consistency over the last, I don't know how many years. The Packers defense would show flashes of being a solid defense and at times an elite defense in the league, but then they'd have a string of games where they couldn't stop the run. They couldn't stop them from scoring and giving up, like you said, 300-400 yards a game. So it's going to be about consistency, being able to play solid defense through the entire season, not just a handful of games through the season.
Well, with that, we've gone way over
Yeah.
how long we want these videos to be, but hey, it's good conversation. I think we're both way too excited for the training camp starting to kick off and the season about to get going. For those of you that still hung out, thank you for please subscribe. Thank you for checking out the video. I guess cadence wise, we're recording these on Tuesday nights, posting on Wednesday. We're going to try to stick to that as much as possible. However, if breaking news comes out like a Jordan Love contract, we'll definitely jump on late some evening and give us, some quick thoughts on that. But yeah, I mean, we'll wrap it up for now. We got ourselves a long training camp ahead of us. If I'm looking at the schedule, I believe they have a practice Wednesday, today. See what I did there? Off Thursday, practices Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So we're looking at, and Tuesday. So we're looking at 5 more practices between now and the next time we record. We're going to have probably plenty to talk about, maybe a little bit more movement in these competition battles. And we'll be gearing up for the family night that next Saturday. So anything for closing thoughts, Christian?
Yeah.
It's a pleasure as
Good
always.
stuff. I really enjoyed the conversation tonight. I think this was a lot even more conversational than our last episode. So it's fun just talking Packers football and going back and forth. I'm sure there's going to be plenty that you can cut out. So we'll shorten it up a little bit.
And I'm sure once you get that connection fixed here in the next,
Yeah.
you're working on it. But I think once we have a solid stream, like a connection between us,
Yeah.
it's only going to get better. I think for our first 2 episodes, I'm not going to pat myself on the back, but I think, I agree. It's been some good conversation. We're figuring out how we want to edit these and post them and what to talk about. We can build super long scripts and never
Right.
touch on half the comments or conversation, but we'll get there. We'll figure it out. We'll make this a smooth running machine. And it's fun to be talking about Packers. God, it's going to be really fun when we're actually talking about games.
Even
It's going to
preseason,
be some fun
even
stuff.
preseason, something to go off of, something that I can actually watch and analyze as I'm watching it will be fun to talk about.
And we haven't even gotten into, which is what I know we both really want to do this, but we haven't even gotten into
Right.
the Bears, the Vikings, the Lions, like anything else happening in our division. There's just, we got to figure this out. I don't care about how we condense these topics. I think once we get past a half hour of Jordan Love contract talk, that will open up a whole lot more time for conversation. And we can definitely start diving into
and
the
there
rest
hasn't
of the
been
division.
a ton of news out of the other camps lately. I mean, you got the JJ McCarthy stuff, but there's not a whole lot to say there. He sounds like he looks good, but is not going to be the starter. That's about it. So there's not a whole lot coming from the rest of the NFC North. The Caleb Williams stuff, I guess, the Bears offense would be something to talk about, but I
Ooh,
I'm sorry to say, Bears fans, but I don't think he's your
yep,
guy.
I know. For the two of you that made it this far in this video, you heard it from Christian first. Caleb Williams is not the guy. I agree. On that note, we will check out for episode 2 under this new format. Thanks everyone for checking it out. Comment, subscribe. Appreciate it so much. And until next time, we will see you on the internet. Thanks for watching.